Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Reengineering the Chess Classic series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we are taking a look at another Mariotti game. This one was played in 1977 at a tournament in Leningrad. White was Mariotti and black was the strong Ukrainian grandmaster Mariotti-Kuzmin. One of those players who I guess was the sort of the second rank of Soviet players. Would have been unbelievably strong in any other country, but yeah, obviously didn't make quite as much an impression within the context of all those amazing players. But 1970s were really good years for him, and yeah, you know, I think from any other country would have been really setting the world alight somehow. Yeah, I mean, this was a really interesting game, and actually it features an opening that I've been playing an awful lot in Bullets and Blitz and scoring quite heavily, although I have to say, don't look at my games recently. I've been feeling so tired recently. It's not good for playing Bullet when you're not feeling sharp, but this opening has been scoring quite nicely, and it's a Mariotti special, so let's have a look at it. So e4, c5 and then b4. It's the wing gambit, well known. But after c takes b4, Mariotti always played it with a twist. So a3 is quite normal. And then after d5, which is the normal move, you take on d5, so open up the centre. You sidestep the the trap, takes queen e5. I think Kamran Shirazi, the strong American IM, once fell into that. I seem to remember. That's the diagram I have in my head. But you play knight f3. And but very clearly, you know, the idea here is to open lines. That's the basic approach. What Mariotti did was something quite different. He played the move d4. And after d5, played the move e5. And this is basically setting up some sort of French structure, you know, with pawns on d4 and e5. And to be honest, if you do something like e6, like quite a few of his opponents did against him, heading into a French type structure, pawns d4, e5 against d5, e6, where you've given up a pawn, but you've actually really solidified these pawns here because there's no longer any pressure from a c-pawn against d4. The engines consider this to be pretty much equal, really, nothing in it, you know, and the positions go quite quickly into white advantages, and you know, Mariotti scored very well with that. Clearly, Kuzmin had done a little bit of work on this because he chose quite a critical line for black. And the key point is really that, you know, if black plays e6, that's fine. But black also has the opportunity to get his bishop outside the pawn chain. And in principle, that's normally a good thing, right? You put your bishop outside the pawn chain, that makes a piece that would otherwise be passive behind the e6, d5 pawns, makes it active, and also gives more space for the black pieces to develop. I mean, it's not 100% clear thing because you see this in the Caro-Kann advance, you know, and it's the short system against bishop f5, and yeah, that bishop, it's got pluses and minuses, but of course, from f5, the bishop's attacking the pawn on c2 as well. And the fact that the pawn's on b4 at the moment, it means that white's d4 pawn is under a little bit of pressure because, or can be put under pressure, because, you know, you haven't got the move c3 to defend the d4 pawn. So what you're saying is that white set up his structure, but black's got this window of opportunity where he can actually do some useful and rather disruptive things. And that's what Sosonko did. He played the move knight c6. Mariotti played the move a3 to get rid of the b4 pawn, and then queen b6, which is one of the engine top moves, actually. Queen a5 is also a possibility. It's a, you know, similar sort of disruptive thing, trying to make use of this pawn on here, and the fact that white's pieces are temporarily not at their best. But queen b6 is not bad, attacking the pawn on d4. Mariotti plays something quite subtle, which is the engine top recommendation. Actually, what Mariotti does, the next 4 or 5 moves, is the engine's top move, which is quite impressive because it's far from obvious that this is the way you have to go. So knight e2, defending the pawn on d4, and you don't put it on f3 because you don't want to get pinned with a bishop g4. That's the idea. But black continues with bishop f5, and yeah, you're attacking the pawn on c2. You'll probably come up with rook c8 and then e6. It's and obviously if the knight moves away, you've got ideas like knight takes d4 or queen takes d4 followed by knight d4 and then knight takes c2. So a little bit awkward for white there. What Mariotti did was very concrete, actually, very brave, and also the engine top line. I mean, it's minus 0.6, but it's unclearer. So a takes b4, knight takes b4, and knight a3. And yeah, this is a critical position. So this is a really interesting position. I mean, obviously the knight and the bishop are attacking the pawn on c2, which is why the white went to a3 to cover this this pawn. But there's also something rather irritating about it, is that you can't play the move c3 because then the knight will come into d3, which is rather awkward. It's the fact that this knight is on e2 is blocking the bishop's defense of the d3 pawn. So obviously, if white can play, a next move like knight to f4 or knight to g3 and then play c3, everything will be pretty good, right? The knight looks odd on a3, but in the wing gambit, it often goes there because it is aiming for b5 very often. So that's not too bad. But white's still in some sort of temporary state of disarray somehow. And Kuzmin plays very concretely, plays the move rook c8, hitting c2. And at first sight, it looks like white's in a lot of trouble here. You can't play c3 because of knight d3, and well, your c2 pawn's going. But Mariotti played a very resourceful idea, also the engine's top move, which is knight f4. And what does knight f4 do? Knight f4 does two things. It attacks the pawn on d5 and also opens the line for bishop b5 check and then castles. And, Mariotti's idea is, okay, you can take my pawn, fine, go for it. But that, that'll be fine for me. It's just a gambit, right? And in actual fact, the engines think that black's strongest here is to play the move a6, stopping the pawn coming to b5. Of course, you can't go c3 now with a rook on c8 because it's no longer supported by a knight on e2. It was one of those things that, white didn't really know what to do. So, I mean, the best move apparently is to go c4 here. Takes, e6 castles. And then, well, black's playing the move knight c2. I'll just show you the engine line. You can see it's quite involved. Knight takes c2, rook c4, knight e3, rook d4, picking up another pawn, and then bishop d2. Yeah, this one's a little bit. It's a little bit nerve-wracking to take this one because well, we've got various discovered attacks against the rook, or we can even take on f5, go rook b1, and then black's got no development. So I mean, the best move is bishop e4, and it carries on somehow. I mean, the engines think that black's 0.64 up. But that's not a lot, and you can see that white's got a lot of compensation here. So yeah, it's one of those moments where you say, yeah, the engine's main recommendation, yeah, not 100% clear really. It's certainly not killing anything at all. You could take with a knight on c2. That's possible. Kuzmin took with the bishop on c2, but all those possibilities now are minus 0.2, so it's sort of, okay, better, but, not winning by any means. Now, the engines are looking actually at the counter move knight takes d5, which is quite nice. Knight takes c2, when white's a pawn down, but compensation. But, yeah, I mean, well, the engines are sort of showing this sort of stuff, but black's just a little bit better, I guess, and you could sort of imagine that black could be quite happy with that. But okay, white's got two bishops. It's sort of okay. It doesn't fill me with enormous joy somehow. I mean, if I've taken the trouble to sacrifice two pawns just to take one back straight away, feels a little bit mwah. And that's probably what Mariotti felt, because he played the move queen g4. hitting the rook on c8, and just intending bishop b5 and castles. And if you ask me, I'd just say, yeah, this must be the natural move to play somehow. But the engines give it -2. But okay, that's it's just one of those things, really. The engines, well, it can transpose, but king d8 is the main move that they give. And then white plays bishop b5, threatening queen d7, checkmate. E6, and then castles. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it feels like compensation, right? I mean, black's king has been can't move. The black pieces on the king side are still undeveloped. And these guys look a little bit odd. I mean, they've taken some stuff, but there's nothing much to attack more on the queen side. I mean, I think the point is that white finds it hard to defend the d4 pawn, to get at the black position somehow, and black's coming reasonably quickly attacking the pawn on d4. So I think that's the thing, but it's not necessarily easy to be sure about it in a practical game. You could sort of think, well, white gets himself organized, and then I'm just a little bit awkward everywhere. But yeah, I mean, the engines seem to think that that's fine, and ideas like, for example, rook c7, then king c8 to b8 are working quite well for black. Black played e6, bishop b5. But then Kuzmin didn't really dare play king d8 somehow, which I think is understandable. It's you understand why you might be a little bit worried. And he played the move knight c6, which is feels a little bit going backwards, really, because Mariotti has the move knight takes d5, very clever, and if e takes d5, then queen takes c8 check. So Kuzmin has to play queen d8. I'm guessing he didn't miss this, but he just thought that this was a safer way of playing somehow, But and now, the engines, they strange enough, they don't want to take the bishop on c2, which is what Mariotti played, which seems very natural to me. But they want the move knight e3. I think that the key point is they think that the black pieces are really gummed up. For example, they're sort of playing with fire somehow, keeping the bishop active. Don't want to put it back onto g6. Also a bit worried about breaks like d5 in the center. So yeah, I mean, this is just very very murky somehow, and we're attacking this pawn on b7 as well. Yeah, there's a lot to be worried about for black here. It's not at all obvious. It feels like a very irrational position. So yeah, knight e3 would probably have been quite interesting. Of course, for white, it's never easy to be sure, right? I mean, after a move like queen f4, you might be worried about g5, and then the d4 pawn might be going. You're kicking away the queen from there. So yeah, not easy for either side to be sure. What Mariotti did was very natural. I mean, you're getting at least the bishop pair, right? But the engines say, 1.65 now, advantage for black. Rook to b1, and now actually the engines have something concrete, a reason why they really think this can be good. They want to play the move a6, chase the bishop back, and then this very important move, knight b4. You're playing, you're not being a good boy and developing all your pieces there somehow, but it's got the nice point that after knight takes b4, I think, knight e3, we've got stuff like queen a2, I think that was the one, and this rook on b1 is in a lot of trouble. So after knight takes b4, you play bishop b4, and the bishop on c1 is en prise. So rook b4, rook c1 is possible. And then the very important thing is after king f1, black can just play the move knight e7. Because if queen g7, we've got rook g8. And unfortunately, you're getting, it's actually checkmate, you're getting caught on the g2 square. So it's just this concrete way of developing very quickly. And all of a sudden, I mean, you've caught up in development there. And you're ready to castle kingside, and and basically you're going to be somewhat better. And you've got these moves like Queen A2. Oops, sorry, Queen A2, for example. So, for example, one line here was Bishop E3. The engine's playing H5, just knocking the Queen, and then Queen A2. I think you knock the Queen to G5 to stop it coming back to E4 to defend the Rook on B1. Rook D1, G6, and Black's just just got nice development there, and White's just very awkward here. It's going to take ages before White can get developed again. So that would have been really strong for Black, but Kuzmin played the move H5, which also doesn't look bad. You've got to play the Queen back to H3, otherwise, if you played a move like Queen E2, then just Queen G2 would be very nice. So Queen H3, and now Queen E4 check, King D1, and it feels, really feels like there should be something, but the engines don't see anything at all. They the best that they can suggest is the move King D5, Queen D5 rather. So you've forced the king to move. King's a little bit awkward, and then we're just going to have to try and get ahead with development. But okay, I mean, White plays moves like King E2 or whatever, and he's a pawn down, but he's got the two bishops, and Black's still undeveloped. Some weaknesses on the king's side there. It's for a wing gambit. If you play the wing gambit with White, you're kind of happy, right? What Kuzmin did was play the move Queen G4, so he was really trying to bring things back to I guess what he thought was a small but stable edge, where the famed Soviet technique could start motoring. But actually, he's actually put himself into a little bit of trouble here. Because there's a very strong move here. I mean, maybe you want to try and find it somehow. It's not obvious at all. I think it could easily be missed. Or the tactical point behind it could be missed somehow. Yeah, the move is Bishop A4. And the key point is what happens after B6. Maybe you want to just have a little look at that if you didn't spot this move, Bishop A4, before. Well, there's this rather annoying move D5 takes, and then Knight D4 hitting the pin. And the problem is Knight E7, Bishop G5 is really, really awkward. I mean, you're threatening Bishop E7, and if King D8, you're walking into the pin. So there's Knight C6 check. The bizarre thing is that the engines say, this is best. You should play King D7, and you should just give up the exchange. And, you've got a couple of pawns for the exchange and pass pawns on the queen side. This is about equal. But that's not an easy decision to take, especially when probably Kuzmin, was coming from the mindset that he was much better before somehow. And a bit of a shock to look at the position and you suddenly think, this is not so good, right? He played the move Rook C7, which is decent, but, Black's just a little bit worse now. Mariotti took on C6 now, and the big point about it is you can't take with a B-pawn because Rook B8 check's really awkward. Winning in actual fact, King E7, Bishop A3. So he took with a Rook, and now Rook B7, Knight E7, and then, Torch played Knight E3 in this position, wanted to grab the G-pawn, but, Stockfish, they both played, I think both Stockfish and Torch generally preferred Rook A7, which is Mariotti's move. I mean, you take that loose pawn, and then you're leaving this pawn to munch later. I mean, it's a toss-up which one you think is going to be easier to attack. But this feels, this is also safer. I mean, it tidies up the queen side. There's no passed A pawn you have to worry about, and then you just can focus on the G pawn. Now, the engines don't think that White is much better in this position. There's White's a pawn up, but the Rook's currently pinning one pawn down to the H2 pawn. You've got this typical D5 square as compensation for the pawn. And White hasn't got a light squared bishop, just a dark squared bishop on the same colours as these pawns. So there's kind of little factors that say, we should be making a draw from here, really. But okay, you've always got to prove it, right? So Rook C8 was played by Kuzmin, so covering the 8th rank and preparing to move develop the pieces. So rook a4 was played by Mariotti, just actually protecting the pawn, allowing the knight to come to e3 to attack g4. Knight d5, bishop d2, covering the c3 square. That would be an embarrassing fork. Rook to b8, the little threat there, and then king e2. Bishop e7. Yeah, well, I'll mention it on the next move. G3 from Mariotti, and now castles. It's a bit strange. I mean, throughout, Kuzmin avoided playing the move f5 or f6, which really seems like the most natural move, because you're going to end up defending the g pawn, and you can put your king onto f7 and keep the rook on h8, attacking the pawn on h2. And it just seems like, like the most natural way of playing all this, really, and it's a bit hard to imagine what he didn't like. I suppose that he was a bit worried about opening up the 7th rank, and having his king and the bishop pinned, but, it should be all right, really. You should be able to cope with that somehow. So it's a little bit, the fact that he avoids that, it's not terrible, but it gets him into trouble a little bit. So knight e3 played by Mariotti, and now rook b2, and that's another committal decision from Kuzmin. I don't think I would ever have let my pawn on d5 get isolated. The ancients think it's fine, they're just 0.26, but I guess the point about all these things is that when you're defending, you try and give yourself a position where you say, I have. It's not that it's minimal effort, but it's minimal precision, I suppose. You want to be defending in a position where you can say, well, a few inaccuracies, that they won't really matter. As soon as you start giving yourself more pawn weaknesses, the chance that you miss something and that you have to, and that you suddenly have to come to a screeching halt and then start defending something in a passive way, which you didn't want, it just gets larger and larger. I mean, pawn weaknesses have the potential to make you passive, and the engines, of course, can play accurately for long stretches, but we can't. So, it's kind of better not to do it. But it's a perfectly decent move. But yeah, it's a sort of move, it's sort of thing. I wouldn't choose to do this consciously. If I arrive in this position, I will do my best to defend it. But I wouldn't choose to go into this. Put it that way. So Mariotti played the move rook d1. I mean, the big thing about this, the good thing about it for black is that you're getting your rooks pretty active somehow. So rook c8, king f1, rook c2. So that looks pretty good. But Mariotti found a nice development plan there. Bishop e1. You don't want to play the bishop to e3 because you'll probably get chased with bishop g5 somehow. And if bishop g5, rook f2 is just a draw. So I guess that's what Kuzmin was looking for. But bishop e1 is kind of a bit more awkward. I mean, it makes the bishop safe. And here, Kuzmin, well, he just demonstrated what I said, really, where I said about the accuracy thing. Because what the engines want here is to play the move f6. And, one thing you might think of is, well, I don't really understand that, because what if I just go after the d-pawn there? How on earth do you defend that? The key point is that black in that position has got the move bishop b4. So you didn't, we showed the line with the bishop on e3 that the bishop was coming to g5 to exchange it. Here you're coming round to b4. And, of course, takes there. We take check, and then it's just perpetual along the 7th rank. You can't get out of that. So that was actually the key thing that black has to keep in the position. That's very, very important. And Kuzmin somehow, maybe an analogy with bishop e3. He played against bishop e1. He played bishop g5 as well. But I think he just had a complete brain freeze about it, really, because it doesn't make any sense, simply, this move. So rook a5 was played by Mariotti. And I think Kuzmin probably realised that what he was intending didn't work. We'll show what it looks like later. He played the move king h7 and king g6, which can't really have been his idea. Possibly thinking about bringing the king actively like that. But Mariotti just played rook d6 check and then rook d7. So you're sort of covering the stuff there, and I mean black just can't get there quick enough really to cause any problems. If you go f6 for example, just go rook g7, and just keep on munching your pawns basically, and you never get into f3 with any danger. So yeah, I mean Kuzmin came to a screeching halt with king g6 somehow, and Mariotti just played d5. I mean, in all fairness, Mariotti plays it pretty much perfectly according to the engines from now on. So yeah, I mean, basically, Kuzmin didn't stand a chance here, or well, he didn't find a way of creating any chances anyway. He played the move bishop e3 here, so he just threw it in. But yeah, there's a big problem. Maybe when he thought about it originally, he just got confused about what his threats actually were. And I can understand, because it can be a bit confusing. Mariotti gave a little check there. The idea is that if you go something like king f5, you can even just play the move e6. You can just ignore this this bishop and just end up queening your pawn somehow. So Kuzmin played king h7. And then there's a couple of ideas, but actually Mariotti just took on e3. And I think probably that Kuzmin had overlooked that after rook h2, white plays rook d2, and you're not mating on the 8th rank. When you play rook h1, there's just king e2. It's a little bit surprising maybe, that it's easy to forget. I could definitely, short of time or in a blitz or bullet, I could definitely, sort of forget that, oh God, this is not actually covering the 7th rank anymore when I play rook h1, because he took on there and then e4, and the engines are just saying this is completely winning. It's one of those things really where the white can just carry on with e6, and once he gets f takes e6, rook e6, it's slow, but there's nothing that you can do to stop the a little bit like a tortoise on its shell really. There's no way you can stop the that white tortoise from moving forwards and queening. And yeah, I mean this e6 move is really, really strong somehow. For example, if I were to go rook d4, you just go e6, and then you go ef, and somehow you just can't cover this. So you're just queening. Everything's just a bit wrong for black. So rook d3 played king f2, rook f3, king g2. Again, rook e3. We just go e6 again. Yeah, I mean, if you go f6, then I just go e7, and I've got rook e6. Everything's just perfect, fitting together somehow. Even if the king were on g6, actually, this would work, because rook e6, fe stops the king from getting back to f7, or g8 as well, They can't get to f7 somehow. So rook d3 was played, and now e6, and it's all pretty horrible. King g8, d6, king f7, rook e7, e5 check. Nice and slowly, king f5. Mariotti, just for the safety's sake, played the move king f2. And after king e4, d7, black resigned. Doesn't really matter, really. I mean, whatever you do, I'm just going to go e6 and rook e8. And if you were trying to mate me somehow, I mean, I'll probably go there. King e3, I'll just go e6. And what do you want to do to me? Rook a2, I go king d1, you go king d3, I've got d8 queen check there. If you try and if you even try to go the other side, I mean, I could go to d1 as well, but and go king f3, I've got rook f7 check. You can just never actually get out of all this. So after d7, black resigned, and that was yet another win by Mariotti over a very strong Russian grandmaster, or Soviet grandmaster, sorry, Ukrainian grandmaster. I mean, yeah, it's. I mean, Mariotti really won a lot of games against players like that, and I mean, he also beat Korchnoi, he also beat Polugievsky. Okay, not Soviet, but he beat Svetoslav Gligoric a number of times, Yugoslav player. I mean, really had big wins against very strong players, and he was very strong against, this second tier of Russian players, of Soviet players. I do apologise. For example, he also beat Savon as well in a game that we'll probably look at in another video. It's a little bit long, but quite interesting, and really very impressive because there weren't that many Western players who were doing that at the time. So really good victory there. Very interesting opening. Mariotti special in the Wing Gambit. Do hope you're enjoying this this series, and hope to see you at the next ones. Thanks for watching.